Gartner today, Gartner speaks to the fact that at the end of the day, everyone's going to have a co-pilot. I mean, if you talk to, Schmidt, ex-chairman at Google, he talks about the fact that every person should have his own co-pilot, that can basically go out there and help them out with his everyday tasks, etc. We agree. We've essentially got a generative AI co-pilot for every knowledge work in the enterprise. But most from our perspective, we agree with Gartner in the fact that the company that's going to find, value is really the company that captures the most signals and capture the best signals. The company that's able to take data that's unstructured, structured, the company that's able to take that data, clean it up for you, run their own machine learning, deep learning algorithms, curate that data, and then provide you with the quality of insights. Otherwise, you're just basically reporting the news. And all of you can read English, Spanish, French, German, depending on which country you come from. You don't need me, or you don't need a visa to tell you what you obviously know as competent individuals. What you want a visa to do is, in a quick fashion, in context, without a lot of work or onboarding or sales enablement, give you value at every part and every stage of the enterprise, whether you're an AE, whether you're a CRO, or you're a VP or SVP, etc., or in operations, which is one of the toughest gigs out there. Give you the right information, the right context, and help you get exciting results to the top line, as well as help with this consolidation that's going on. Because we're getting questioned for every $1 million deal we do in terms of how many systems can you replace, why do we have all these point solutions, how can you take away the solution approach. So enough about me and Aviso, and I could go on for days, which is one of the reasons I'm not invited to these events anymore. But Charles interested in me coming. Good about decision, Charles. But I'll turn it to Charles. And Charles, talk about you've seen it all, right? You've seen what I call tech client, which is SIBO. You've seen man before that. I know what data is on, then of course SIBO, and then you've seen Oracle, Salesforce. You've been to this transition to the cloud, and then of course tools like Aviso, and you did an evaluation of us versus the industry standards. And now it's exciting new time with large language models and generative AI, and what it means for both the sales leaders as well as sales doing the likes.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing for me with all the stuff we're talking about is we're all sales leaders of some kind, or sales operations or whatever in the room. But at the end of the day, none of this works unless our salespeople actually use the flipping tools. Let me ask a question to the group. How many people in here, if you told your salespeople tomorrow that you're going to take Salesforce.com or whatever your CRM is away from them, how many of those salespeople are going to quit over it? And then you lose your offer. How many of them would buy you a drink? No, yeah, right. And that's the problem, is that they have fun giving Trevor Holt because he used to be a top salesman for Salesforce. And he's the pro.
And Jody's charts.
No, I say because when you sell a CRM to a company, they're selling it to us as the sales leaders. They're selling it to the CEO. And what they want to know what's going to happen on the big thing. They're missing the most powerful thing about the tool is what it does for the seller. It's enabling the seller to know what to focus on and then make sure they don't drop any balls. But that pitch is what sells it to the CEO of Honeywell. So he just wants to be able to run a report and know what his forecast is in. But that forecast is garbage unless it's getting good raw data from the salespeople who need to be doing it. So I'll ask another question. How many of you, when you've talked to your salespeople about Salesforce in the last month, have used the expression log that or logging? You use that word, logging. How many of you use the word planning? Logging is for us. Planning's for them. So you do nothing else, change that language. Now, what Aviso enabled for me, though, was because of that thing, because it's all about log. I got to have it so I can run the report for Trevor and he can see what we're doing, right? If that's how the tool's getting used, the salesperson can give a rat's honey about it. Because the salesperson, it's, oh yeah, great, my boss can run a report. It's not helping them at all. If you change the context in two ways, your usage by the sellers of Salesforce changes dramatically. The first thing is what we just talked about, right? It has to be presented to them as, don't use this as a logging tool. Use it as a planning tool so your salespeople can think through what they're doing. But the bigger usage, right now, in most cases, the relationship between the salesperson and the CRM is a one-way direction. It is them providing information with the tool. The tool gives them nothing back. What hooked me on Aviso years ago, and what got me going, holy crap, this could help me change the dynamic, is it made it a two-way thing. if the salesperson gives data to it, it gives them back insights into what's going on. Because the number one thing they need, I was just working with a company this week, their average salesperson is 340 open deals, right? You can't focus on 340 deals. So if you tell the salesperson, go focus on deals, what are they going to do? You're going to focus on the top 10, the biggest 10. That's not necessarily the smartest 10 that they focus on, but they're the biggest ones. That's what they focus. What sold down in Bezo was that the AI would come back and it'd say, hey, these are the deals that have the highest probability. These are the deals that have the lowest probability. And it's going to say, a mix of probability and volume says the deals you should be focusing on to make your number are these deals. And then more importantly, it'll tell them why that's the biggest, the biggest probability deal. Because, hey, this one's moving along. There's a lot of interest from the customer. We're getting faster responses to our emails, the tone of the emails that we're seeing from the customer. All those things are right now, you kind of rely on the salesperson's gut to tell them. Comes out of the AI. But with the AI, it's impersonal. It's not, because the salespeople are so close to it. Let's face it, have you ever had a salesperson met a deal they ever didn't like? They love everything. But the other problem with salespeople is that they're kind of like that dog in that movie Up, ready to score out. Oh, there's another deal over there. You got to give them the focus. And so I know it's a long rant, Trevor, but the reason this worked for me was it let me give those two things to the salespeople, because it's easy when you take a salesperson to say, I want to use a CRM to get compliance. You just need a big 2x4 and the one just end of an ad load. All right, and if you do that, you'll get compliance. What you want is adoption. You want people to say, I'm going to use this because it's better for me. And that only happens if they get something back that shows them it's better for them. And that's the beauty of using AI to give them insights that can look at a huge data set and give it back.
Well, it could have served better. So it was interesting because I had dinner with Sarah, who's Charles' manager, and she runs $6 million business there about 3 weeks ago. And, the first thing that came out of the mouth was she spoke to Charles later and expressed some of the excitement she had about what we were doing with account planning and, AI workflows and automation of, the process and the amount of time we're going to save them. Like, it's like 30 hours of each account plan on each base, like briefing dot, etc. But a number of questions, I really missed Charles. Can you clone him? And I was like, that's interesting because one of the things we are doing, and actually Charles and I are talking about it, because we are, in a sense, going to provide a digital cloud. One of the things we've done for major customers is, you get the question all the time, right? You got the middle majority. You got the top performers. And the top performers can be two types of people. One, they can be prima donnas who are just naturally good at their job. And you gave them to put any kind of information into a backend system. Doesn't matter. It's not about Salesforce. It's any type of CRM or any type of database. They're going to be like, what are you going to do? You're going to let me go? I mean, I bring in the business. How I do it is, is my secret sauce. So the question is, how do you bring the middle majority up so that you get the top performers? And unfortunately, as Charles will tell you, I'm probably the worst salesperson in the world. Because, I did 49% of my number, my first year as a salesperson in Oracle when I was 28. And it looked great on paper. But honestly, if you ask me, would I want to clone myself? Absolutely not. What I would rather clone is someone who has brought me revenue in for the last 15 years in Salesforce, Oracle, on a regular basis, is disciplined, has the best practices. At a leadership level, someone like Charles, who's predictable, and Sarah was sure she could better him every quarter after quarter. He had a rigor to him. Looking at his body of work for the last 5 years, whether it was QBRs, whether it was negotiations, whether it was one-on-one inspections, we were able to basically, digitally clone that activity. So everyone in the organization can say, hey, what would Charles say? And it doesn't have to be just Charles. We're doing it across the board at Ironclad. We're doing it now for other customers like Lenovo, etc., where you can literally ask, what would this best performer in this role do, right? But where I was going with this is, at Aviso, one of the people that we, wanted to clone is basically David Watson, and he's been here for 15 years. And the thing I like about David is he's repeatable and he delivers. He's not a prima donna. He's not a flash in the pan. And that's really what's important if you want to inculcate best practices, right? So that's where AI is taking us, right? We don't want to be limited by, what we already know in terms of whether it's forecasting or revenue intelligence. It's about empowering people to spend the most time they can with their customers, spend the most time with the knowledge that they can get from systems that they couldn't get before, and automating the work process and automating the rote work. So you can actually, when I look at sales operations people, I think they're the most underrated and the most unappreciated. When actually they're the heroes out there, sales operations, sales leaders, because at the end of the day, everyone looks at them as someone who's making them do something because someone else up the chain, is asking them to do that, which is, yes, it's true in some senses, but you can't run a viable enterprise without having those signals. But even when you talk to Adele, who's working with us now on this, and you talk to some of the largest companies in the world, like NetApp, etc., they've come to the realization, as Charles and I have been discussing, and even Honeywell, that expecting somehow to change your existing CRM, and by the way, and I don't want to use some Dynamics, so this is not about Salesforce. Mark's been my mentor for many years, I'm a big fan of his, so, just want to say in the room, I'm not dissing Salesforce guys, please. But anyway, whether it's Salesforce, or whether it's Dynamics, or whether it's HubSpot, or Freshworks, who's actually closing a transaction with us, I think next week, I don't want to jinx myself. But either way, right, the fundamental premise is not changed in terms of CRM. You're still expecting people to enter data in. You're still expecting to then run reports on that. But what if, you could just have a simple Google interface as Dell has demanded from us at NetApp, and the rep could ask questions of that on day one without any onboarding. He could run his business, and he could focus on actually providing the best customer experience because he's getting those signals sent to him in context, the right time, the right place. And as far as executive management, as long as they've got the information they need to make the decisions that they need in terms of investments, in terms of risk mitigation, and satisfying Wall Street, then everyone's a winner over here, versus this constant battle where there's no real economic value between the employee and the enterprise. And there's this constant pull and push where you got a big brother complex because you're doing things because someone's telling you to. And I don't know how many of you have kids, but anytime you tell a kid to do something, we damn sure, at least in my extended family, they're not going to do it. Right. But if there's an incentive with its characteristic, and they feel like, at the end of the day, it's something that's going to empower them, I found that to be a much, much easier conversation, especially with the last generation and this generation. And I can see that because I'm 50 years old. So, things have changed substantially since Charles and I were doing business together. But
you just put something in mind. It's funny because it ties into what the keynote, the Zoom info guy was talking about, that salesperson that you want to emulate. And you're talking about the CRM, the pipeline's a very lagging indicator. It's the account plan actions and the business stuff that drive what's going to end up in the pipeline later. Those are your leading indicators. And in the talk, the guy from Zoom Info kept talking about how, this one incredible salesperson could read the 10Ks, could listen to the investor calls, and do all this. And it's just funny because after I had this meeting with my old boss, she pinged out to me. I always stayed in touch socially since I retired. But she actually sent me this email and just said the opening line was all caps, wow. And we went back and forth on what was it. So I think you should talk about the account planning piece, because we talked about that, how does a really good account plan that centers on what matters to the customer that you're talking to comes about. And not all salespeople are good at, they're not trained at how to, they don't even know what to look at when they read an annual report. What tells you what you need to see tomorrow. So can you talk about that? Sure, that was all new to me.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, you decided to be less. But I'm sure you're enjoying.
Play some golf.
I know. I know you, and you're enjoying retirement. It's just sad I'm not from the back, but that's okay. I'll take that for Sarah. She said to brought that to you today. So, but look, at the end of the day, it's I'm a huge believer in quality versus quantity. I'll give you an example. There's a recent account we won. I'm not going to give the company's name, but one of the fastest growing software companies in the world, doing $500 million, going to $1 billion. And they used to think things a certain way. And it was a seminal moment, me having a discussion with their CRO and the head of operations, because they were using this concept that more is better. And what I mean by that is the more meetings you have, the more appointments you set. It's this top-down approach where I'm going to hire 100 salespeople. They're going to have 1,000 meetings, 30%. And then they're going to boil down into whether or not, a transaction is going to happen or not. And we strongly believe against that. What we're looking for is quality versus quantity. And what I mean by that is, it's not so much about how many meetings you have. I mean, at the high school student to track that for you. The question is the quality of the meeting. The question is the quality of the interaction. The question is, are you having it at the right point in time in the sales cycle? Just because someone's a CEO and contacting a CEO is meaningless, unless, of course, you've got a value proposition and he's running the project himself. Often it's different folks and different constituents in the enterprise. So the ability to figure out who's actually making the decisions, who do you meet with? And then, of course, have you captured their vision, their agenda, and that imagination, and how they're going to respond to you. You know, one of the large parts at Honeywell was our ability to know what we call recency. So the question is, when you're responding, you know, when does an executive respond back to you? Is he showing interest? Is he engaging with you? The other thing we're big on is sentiment and the subtext of what not being said. And what I mean by that is, it's very difficult, we found, you know, looking at, you know, at hundreds of thousands of calls, for folks to be very candid with you, right? So if you're just capturing the conversation and you're looking for trackers and words, etc., and messages, a lot like most of the conversational intelligence solutions out there, you're missing the point. The question is, what was the buyer sentiment? What was the body language? What was the tone inflection? And if people are like, what do you mean by tone inflection, Trevor, and why do we really care? And, you know, it's a good thing, I'd say, that most human beings are not good at being liars. And I say this in the best possible way, because to be a good liar, and, you know, my dad was an MI6, and we discussed this often on, to be a good liar, you can't be a psychopath, because if you want to beat, you know, polygraph machine, or you want to beat modern science, like some of the stuff we use in terms of looking at constriction of his esophagus, or pursing of lips, or using long run-on sentences, something like, you know, is used by Quantico right now, you've got to truly believe the lie you're telling. And most people can't, right? So what we're saying is, you know, we provide the subtext of the conversation so you can quickly validate early in the sales cycle whether or not you've actually got interest in a transaction. Downstream, whether it's just a negotiation or there's some value to it, right? And when you look at that, and you look at the context of an account plan, rather than just read the news and give you your 10K, pass it, there's a lot of tools out there that can do that. For us, it's more about taking the information from your 10K, et cetera, and basically pulling in insights, pulling in the value, relaying it to opportunities, you know, and really giving you an idea of whether this account plan is going to help you get to your target, to your part to plan. And that's really important. And that's what we've automated, which is one of the reasons, you know, folks like Lenovo just decided on using us from a generative AI perspective. Obviously, it was a battle with Microsoft Copilot, but they decided on us, you know, and I can say that in public. And one of the reasons, you know, folks like Honeywell, et cetera, are so excited about, you know, where we're taking AI and where we're taking AI workflows and questions like part to plan and actual intelligence that add value and help you close business faster versus being rote work or just something that you can send up to your executives and say, hey, I've done my job. For example, at Honeywell, it used to take them 32 hours to create a strategic account plan. So everyone would complain about it, and no one really did it. It would take 6 hours of back and forth for an exec briefing doc because you had to get Charles's approval, Sarah's approval, you had to go to Vimal for the Vimal meeting, and then you go back and forth. With the Visa, you're down to like 3 minutes for an exec briefing doc, which is germane, relevant. You know, it's recency is huge because we tell you if there's SLAs not missed, what the temperature of the client is, personality analysis, topics to bring up with the client, et cetera, which is really big. And on the account plan perspective, we're telling you where to spend your time. People don't realize that unless you're a Salesforce or an Oracle, and I've worked at both, by the way, before that at McKinsey, and you've got huge sales teams, the one commodity you don't have, and you're fine with 65% of your team missing their number, which is the norm, by the way. You've got to know where to focus, right? Charles spoke about the fact that, you know, one of the things that his teams were, because they were really lean, was focusing on the right deals and where they could focus their energies and then what they could put in. And we believe that too. We're not about just going and hiring 1,000 people and then expecting, you know, $100 million of revenue. For us, it's about, you know, the quality of the signal deploying each other, the quality of the information, but also how we upskilling your reps. And one thing we track very carefully is incremental revenue per rep, and we tie our KPIs to that and the accuracy of the information we're providing. And that's one of the reasons we're seeing this, you know, consolidation across the board, with folks moving away from point solutions and the swivel chair towards having a revenue operation system, as I pointed out, across the board from end to end, that can actually deliver value and is ready to put their money where their mouth is, right?
And no, I think so. And I think the important piece in this really is, if I look at how we would like tell a salesperson where they're going to end up 10 years ago, it was just telling, right? It was like, well, yeah, this many open deals, this is your win rate, this is where you're going to finish the year. And that's not exactly predictive forecasting. And it doesn't, I mean, the salesperson did that math for itself. We're not adding anything of value to the salesperson's process to tell them that. What we brought into Aviso was, one, hey, stop focusing on the bad deals. I'll tell you a very interesting stat from IT at Honeywell. Our average time to win a deal was 230 days. Not bad. It was a long cycle business, so it was a long selling cycle. Our average time to lose a deal was 430 days. Yeah, so it's kind of like, hey, she's going to the prom with someone else. You just don't done. And part of me wants to respect the tenacity of the salesperson who didn't want to let that thing go. And it's the optimism. We had that speech a little while ago about the optimistic salesperson. You get into foolish tenacity and foolish optimism. I like the optimism, I like the tenacity, but there's a point where you have to be realistic. What I really liked about this tool is it's an impartial device that's telling the salesperson she's going to the prom with someone. When the boss tells you that, you'll get into this fun debate. It's like, he just doesn't understand everything. But when you get that objective source giving you that, it changes the equation. And then the flip side of it is, you always get into the question of, hey, if I do that algebra, say your win rate is this, your pipeline's this big, and you're going to get there. That is, as Trevor said, it's a lagging indicator. It's at the very end of the cycle. The other piece of Aviso, what he talked about, he went by it relatively quickly. The piece about helping me make a smart account plan, which comes down to what's my approach to the customer entity. Like a few years ago, the CEO of Honeywell was just maniacal about cash flow. Everything was the cash. All right, and he just hammered. So every executive all the way down the chain, that was on everybody's annual performance plan. Now that would tell me if I was trying to sell something to Honeywell that, I would express everything about my value proposition in terms of how it's going to impact your cash flow. The genius of what they've done with the account plan, and it kind of ticks me off I didn't have it when I was at it, was it would go scrape all that data and hand it to it. I mean, I had one time when I was at an earlier company, I hired a former stockbroker as a salesperson just so he could do that for me, because I had this big strategic accounts group, and he would like draw it all out and say, okay, this is a company and this is what's on the CEO's line. And he was brilliant at it, and the other salespeople just loved him because he was helping them figure out what to focus on. So when you get into the more leading indicators, making sure the salesperson is not waving their arms around them, but they're going in and they're having a meaningful conversation that they hit it right off the bat with going, I know what's on your CEO's mind. I know what's probably on your performance plan. If I can give you a way to address that, is that a conversation you want to have? Yeah, they always want to have that conversation. That's what I thought was the most powerful piece of that, and I'm really, really happy.
I know.
Didn't have that 2 years.
Well, I mean, details matter, right? I mean, like Charles put it a while, right? Like I said, I've always punched above my weight in most parts of my life. So probably that's one of the reasons, I would rather be the best user of Visa without the Salesforce, because I always thought there was no deal I couldn't win. It's a bit of a Jesus complex. But I love the hard way that didn't work. So, my journey in Visa the last 5 years of building the solution has been in some ways my way of, accepting guilt and trying to make up for all the things that I did, whether I was at McKinsey, Oracle, and Salesforce, to make my team's lives miserable because, hey, I always wanted to be the guy who did 320% of this number. I was never really interested in if you're going to make a number. For me, it was, well, how are you going to make 3x your number? But often I would use brute force, which is I would use QBRs. I would use, you have to learn your 10K, you had to do it. There was no choice if you want to be on my teams. And we produced the results. But I always think back at what cost, right? And I think about the fact that with the Visa, if I had a Visa without the Salesforce, rather than doing 300% of my number and my team's doing 12, 14 hours a day, which is tough, right? Again and again, to be repeatable. I think we could probably done a couple of hours of research every week. So for me, what we really built at Visa in some senses is the force multiplier. A force multiplier that really is your best friend and your chief of staff or your personal assistant, whether you're a CRO, whether you're a CEO. And we strive for that. It's not about just addressing management's needs, but also delighting the end user. And at the end of the day, I hate to sound really transactional, but it's about putting money in your pocket quicker. And you want your recipe coin to operate in a strategic fashion. It's my job as a CEO, it's my CFO's job, etc., to worry about the bigger problems in terms of cash flow and in terms of investing in the right places and adding that information for the reps. But how do I make my reps successful and put money in their pockets quicker? And that's, at the end of the day, what a Visa does with the least friction and with an exchange of economic value, right? While delighting folks across the board. And we're big on results, right? So as you can see, the impact at Honeywell was tremendous. The impact of Lenovo already has been tremendous. We're very sensitive in making sure that whatever we ask you to invest in us, we invest in you via KPIs and holding ourselves accountable both in terms of our contracts as well as our value. So that being said, we got about 2 minutes left. Is there any questions? I'd love to take it. I didn't want this to be just about me and Charles and our love fest to do, and Honeywell's love fest in the beach though, right? So any questions, happy to take it, whether it's about large language models, our approach to it, why it's unique, generative AI, things that are top of mind for you guys. Silent audience. Yeah.
So how do you build out the account model? I get sentiment and all that stuff. How do you set to build out an account model?
Well, essentially what we're doing is we're using 9 agents. So we think of this as the California Gold Rush. And why should you decide that you want to use OpenAI and Copilot, or you want to use Anthropic, or you want to use Lambda, you want to basically use Lambda 3? Why should you satisfy with that, right? So what we basically have is 9 agents that use a couple of sources. So there's the internal stuff, where it's behind your firewall and small selective models, where we've curated your data, your opportunities, your emails, your calendar, your sentiment, and that data sets here. Then we have another 8 agents that go out and look at 10Ks, that go and look at earnings calls. For example, Jimmy Dimon writes a really good chairman's letter. So does Warren Buffett. We look at that, we pass that information, and then we bring that in. And then those 9 agents choose which LLM to use, whether it's Lambda 3 or whether it's ChatGPT 4, et cetera, et cetera. We typically don't like OpenAI because they don't let you own the data from a small selective model perspective. And most of our clients like Lenovo, Honeywell, GitHub, et cetera, want to own the model and own the IP and want that to stay with them. So we use that. So we don't want to be the guys telling you which model to choose. And I don't think you guys should settle for anyone. Let the AI decide which open source model. And at the end of the day, you guys reap the benefits, because at the end of the day, there's this amazing battle going on. And you're always going to have the best tool as long as you keep a close track of lineage and you keep a close track of how that's changing. I mean, you guys are fine, right? That helps.
You have 5 seconds left. That was really impressive.
Yeah, I know. Might be a football. Sounds good. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Aviso. We're here to help. Okay? Take care. Thanks, y'all.